Well, this is Lynn Fraser with the Kiloby Center for Recovery and the Radical Recovery Summit. And I'm really happy to be here today with a different hat on. Terry Wellbrook from the Healing Place podcast is going to interview me about the somatic inquiry, the mindfulness practices that I do with people. And I'm really happy to be here. Terry has interviewed me before for her podcast. And so when I was thinking of someone who I might want to have a chat with about my work, you came to mind right away. So, Terry,
Awesome.
why don't you go ahead and we'll just start? Maybe introduce yourself a little bit, though, and just kind of let people know who you are and what it is you do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. I feel honored to be here with you and be a part of this event. Yeah, so I host and produce the Healing Place podcast, which I'm very excited has now been downloaded in 80 countries around the world and continues to blossom in its reach, trying to grow the YouTube channel and the video part of it. But the audio part is, yes, continues to blossom on iTunes and Spotify and now Amazon Music, Pandora. So
Mm.
anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. But I also write a monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. I'm finishing a book titled Unicorn Shadows: From Trauma to Triumph, a Healing Guide, and about my trauma journey, but not just the trauma journey, but lessons I learned along the way, like resilience and strength and courage, and then exercises for the readers to embark on, should they choose to, for their own healing journeys. And then, oh my gosh, what else do I do? I own a business in Ohio. We recently just moved to South Carolina, to my favorite island, and it's just paradise and beautiful and a dream come true, which is wonderful. So,
Mm.
oh, and speaking, I've been doing a lot of speaking events, and which has been wonderful, and telling my story of hope, as I like to say. My story from trauma, my first 22 years of life were filled with horrible trauma and adverse childhood experiences. Um, and then into triumph and living a life filled with joy and tranquility, and what I did along the way. So that's my soul work, as I call it, my mission to share that. So thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you're here with me together. We can do this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to, again, I learn from you every time we talk. I love learning everything that you do in the world, and especially about, obviously, trauma recovery. And I know one of the things we've talked about a lot is, um, what do you mean when you say that trauma is stuck in our bodies?
That's such a good thing to know. And I think, one of the reasons it's good to know is that at some point people reach a tipping point where they realize they don't have to be scared of the energy in our body. So when we have a feeling of overwhelm, there's so many really good descriptions or definitions of trauma now too. Gabor Mate's is still one of the ones that I use a lot, and that's that the effect of trauma is when we disconnect from ourselves, from our sense of value. So we get into the core deficiency beliefs and from the present moment. And other people will define it as anything that leaves us overwhelmed, where we can't manage what's happening at the time. And then that's when we store the residual of it in our body. So if you had something happen to you that was traumatic, and then you were able to heal it right away, you were able to be present, someone was there to help you to co regulate your system, you came back to a feeling of safety very quickly, you had a feeling of connection so that you didn't have that experience because there's something wrong with you. So then you were able to release the shame, then that residual wouldn't be stuck in the body. But that almost never happens. And so when we have childhood adverse experiences, especially, one of the hallmarks of that is that we don't have anyone to tell, we don't have anyone to get support from. And sometimes the people who are creating the adverse experience are the people who should be caring for us. And so we know that we're not going to get any help from that side. We internalize it and then we just try to do the best we can. So we end up with this soupy, mucky mess of it's my fault if I was smarter or cuter or something, that it wouldn't be happening to me. And if I could only be more like that, then I could stop it. And so we take on the full responsibility for the situation we're in childhood. And, it might be something like a parent with mental illness, anxiety, or depression, it's usually related to unhealed intergenerational trauma. But we end up with this feeling like there's something wrong, I'm being hurt, or there's neglect in the sense of nobody seems to care about me and my experience. If I just put on a happy face, everybody's happy with that, and then I'm dying inside. And so we have this kind of mess that happens, and we just kind of shove it down because we don't have any options. Children don't really have any power. We can't change where we live, who we live with, what they do to us. And so we internalize all of that, and kind of our nervous system brings us some options, some strategies, like we go into immobilization, we go into freeze. Sometimes we dissociate. So that's a kind of a flight response. And sometimes you even, we hear about dissociation of people kind of going up to the corner of the room and looking down on your body from there because there's something happening that's too overwhelming. And then we go into fight response. Some people go into fight response. So, one of the things that I think is helpful for us to know is all of this is being driven by the nervous system. We don't make a conscious choice around any of that. When we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that immobilizing or the reactivity, all of that is driven by our primitive brain and our nervous system, and it's trying to help us feel safer, or it's trying to get us to a place of safety. And then as adults, we look around and we go, gosh, what happened? I've been sleepwalking for 30 years. I'm in this relationship that doesn't work for me. I hate my job. I don't, and then we kind of wake up and go, well, maybe some of us are learning about trauma, which I'm so excited to see how many more people are learning about trauma now. And because we can stop shaming ourselves and we can understand our system. If we have a feeling of heaviness in our chest, or sometimes we'll have a feeling of blockage in our throat, or a tight fist in our gut, all of those are trauma that wasn't able to be released at the time, and they come in with their associated memories. So we might have 1,000 memories of not feeling safe, and that's what's contributed to that tightness in our gut. We don't have a healthy breathing pattern because we've been in freeze. We kind of just freeze up, and then we don't really breathe very well. So a lot of those things, it's really helpful to know that those are trauma responses, and if we start to work with them like a trauma response, we can heal them. So if we're holding our breath, we could take a deep breath and we could practice breathing deeply.
Yes.
Sometimes that might feel a little bit shaky because the reason we stopped breathing deeply was to protect ourselves. Because if a predator is on the run and we're trying to hide from a predator, we don't want to just be relaxed and breathing, and because we're trying to go into freeze, we're going into freeze to try to protect ourselves. So some of it's a bit nuanced and it takes a little bit of time. But one of the things that keeps us from going in our body is that feeling like if there's something painful here, there's something wrong. And if there's something painful, it means that it's trying to hurt me somehow. So one of the first questions I think is helpful for people is to look and say, okay, I feel this pressure in the back of my neck and shoulders. It hurts. Is it here to hurt me? Or I feel this kind of dizziness come over me, or I feel this kind of clench in my gut. I stop breathing. Is that here to hurt me? And if not, why is it here? And literally nobody ever says, oh yeah, it's here to hurt me. It's out to get me. And a couple of times it'll happen and we'll go, well, how do you know that? And there's always words and pictures that we can work with. But then when we come into it, it's like, this is some wounded part of us, some warning, some you need to protect yourself because people are going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And that's always what it is. So then we can work with it, look at the memories. And the one thing about the memories that are associated with that is that traumatic memories don't update for time. So they've done research with soldiers, for instance, from prior wars, and they will recall things 10 years later, 30 years later, 50 years later in the exact same way that they talked about it before. And people who are not stuck in a trauma, in a traumatic response, our memories change and they shift a little. We remember some things, we don't remember others. And so, what we're doing with this mindfulness somatic inquiry is we're staying in this moment in time and then recalling the memory. And sometimes there's, a recall memory with specifics, and sometimes it's more of a felt sense or an energy. But we're bringing it into this moment in time when, in fact, our bodies are safe and we can be safe for ourselves. So that's what a long answer to what do you mean about trauma stored in the body, and that people are reluctant to go into the body because it felt overwhelming at the time. It felt we were powerless at the time, and we don't want to experience that again.
Yeah.
And so we find ways to get away.
Thank you. Yes,
Mhm.
and so true. I mean, there were so many things you were saying. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes," because I could so relate to it. I had 25 years of severe panic attacks after that second bank robbery and murder that I was involved in when I was 22, and um, for years I did. I thought my panic symptoms were trying to hurt me, and now if I feel anxiety arise or I don't have panic attacks anymore because of
Mhm.
the work I've done, but if I start to feel the sensations, I can take a step back and say, what lesson do I need to learn here? And
Right.
yes, and journal on it or do whatever I need to do my grounding work, staying present in the now, lots of mindfulness practice stuff. But yeah, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Because
beautiful.
something has activated that. One thing that's I think so helpful is that our nervous system is not random. We
Yeah,
don't randomly have a panic attack. We have a panic attack because there's a high level of threat. And the threat might not be accurately perceived. And
right.
Stephen Porges talks about neuroception and skewed neuroception if you've had trauma. We don't accurately perceive threat. So we might be reacting to a threat that was real when you were 22, and it's not real in this moment in your home. And so if there's something coming up, it's a memory, a muscle memory, a felt sense. And there's a lot of people now that are starting to look at where exactly and how exactly is trauma stored. It seems to be stored in the fascia, the that thing it's in all the muscles, it's in all of our tissues. It connects us. It's our connective tissue. And so that's what we kind of tighten up, and we could relax, and then we could kind of let that release out of our body. And as it releases, then we're not as susceptible to the triggering anymore too. Things don't activate us in the way we do. We come down from that hypervigilance into a more appropriate level of vigilance. Or we come up from being frozen and not being vigilant to a more appropriate level. So it works kind of from both directions.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
just started reading about and hearing about fascia, and I started qigong, which is
Yeah, cool.
energy work, and on Monday evenings. And it's, oh my gosh, it's so amazing because we do that work on loosening up and releasing um, fascia. And it really is amazing how
Mhm.
just doing that type of work and energy work can, well, and what you just said about, being triggered, the journaling part of it, I can find what the triggers are if I'll just journal on it a little bit and say, "Oh, that's what was arising," or "That's what I felt was happening." Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and then we have the opportunity now from our adult self who's more resourced and who understands things. And then we have that opportunity to really make friends with ourselves and to, okay, what is it that I'm being triggered or activated around? Okay, I can see that it's, that look on someone's face reminds me of that look on someone else's face. And I go into a very appropriate response because it feels dangerous. It's how our mind works. Our primitive brain is always making associations. So if we get a similar look or if there's a similar tone of voice, a deep booming male voice can sometimes, even if they're not angry, it can sometimes trigger fear. And so our associations are something that we can kind of stop and look at. And that's one of the things I like about the Kiloby inquiries that I work with people on is that we look at thoughts as words and pictures, and we can hear words. Sometimes people can put them up in their mind's eye, and we can look at it and say, what is that trigger? And journaling is one way. Looking at it is another way, staying in our bodies in the present moment. There's so many ways to do that. And then we become kind of free of it because we have a direct experience of safety. So we look around the room and go, my body is safe right now. And we recall that look on someone's face and we can, do some tapping or we can put it in a
Yeah,
frame. We can do all of those ways to remind ourselves that that's not the situation we're in right now. Right now, we're here, our body's safe, and we're looking at these memories and healing them. And then the next part of that is how can we connect? So Gabor Mate talks about we disconnect from ourselves. And part of that disconnection can often turn into a mean, nasty inner critic. What's the
yeah,
matter with you that blah, blah, blah? Here you go again. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. And some of those things are things we heard when we were children, and some of them are just things we hear from the culture. Or we live in a very aggressive culture. And to be able to pause and get in our body and connect with that, for you, that 22-year-old, you must have been terrified when that happened.
right,
And then you had a lot of other experiences as a child, as I had a lot of those experiences as a teenager. So I'm vulnerable when that comes up, especially if I'm still disconnected and shaming myself. So taking this time to just slow it all down, come into our body, because coming up into our head is a flight response often, and then we don't feel it in our body. So all of those ways that we work with it help us to release the triggers. If I don't believe that there's something wrong with me, then that look on someone's face of contempt doesn't hit me the same way as it would have. Doesn't land the same.
yeah,
Mhm.
excellent. You said the word practice earlier, and I love that idea of that. I mean, practice is so. I know you do your daily meditations, and uh, it's practicing these calming strategies that you do and help others do is just so important. It becomes so habitual, um, and
Mhm.
changing those neuron pathways and what trauma does to the but brain plasticity studies now showing how we can
Yeah.
change that with these practices.
Mhm. And the exciting thing I think about that too is that it's happening in our brain and in our body. And Dr. Rick Hanson's been on the summit a couple of times, and he talks about we need to take it in. We need to notice good things. And so again, we're working with that. Let's connect again. So if you can, right now we're on Zoom, but we're looking into each other's eyes and we see a friendly face on the other side, right? That helps us to feel connected and safer. It engages our ventral vagal system. If we look at, Stephen Porges with his polyvagal system, and it's understandable. There's good science. And so
Yeah,
when we have the experience over and over of a little bit more safety, then our shoulders start to release, our breath starts to get better. And I have some people that have been coming to the practice. Many, many people come every day, some come regularly. And that's all they do. They don't work privately with me. They're not doing anything else. They're just coming and resting and healing their nervous system. And it's amazing the transformation that can happen. And it doesn't happen in a week,
right.
it happens over months. And then it just kind of gets more and more subtle the deeper it goes. So it's not as dramatic sometimes. It is an amazing thing when we can show up and do a practice and be present with ourselves, when we can
Yeah,
look and see, wow, look what I'm telling myself. I would never talk to anybody else like that. Why am I talking to myself like that? And start to have some sympathy and connection for, that me that was 12 years old or 3 years old or, to connect with ourselves again in all of those ages, all those levels. It's
yeah,
very powerful.
very much so. I know two of the most powerful things my therapist had recommended to me was one, be gentle with yourself. And I remember thinking, how the heck do I do that? What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
gentle, because I was always so, my logical brain was, why can't you get over these panic attacks? Come on, you can do this. You're smart. Figure it out. And just so hard on myself, not realizing the impact the trauma had had on me on a mind, body, soul level.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the other one was just notice, and that was very
Ah,
powerful. And so I do that.
right.
I just notice, okay, what's happening in this moment? What is arising? Notice the feelings, even though they may be scary sometimes.
Right.
But just notice. Yeah,
Right, and you're doing that in a way that is grounded in this moment when you're safe. So even those the brain has such a negativity bias because it's always trying to keep us safe. So it doesn't notice all of the good things, it just notices the scary things, and it alerts us to that, right? So when you're feeling something like that, and then you have the direct experience that you made it through, you felt it, it moved and shifted because it always does, but
yeah,
we don't know that when we're trying to avoid it. We just think, "If I ever let this in or if I ever start crying, I will never stop, and I'm just gonna be washed away with this." And it's ironic because the panic attacks that do kind of wash us away don't anymore once we have some of these tools.
yeah,
And once we do the practices, then we have that confidence that, oh, okay, I know I can see this is happening. My mind's starting to go into a spin, or I'm starting to lose, the deeper breath. I know what to do now. And that's so powerful. We have so much agency. And then we go, I know how to do this next time. If it happens again, I'll notice it. I'll do these things. It'll be good. And then we have that confidence that we can do that.
yeah. And again, I just think it becomes habitual. The
Mhm.
practice makes it habitual in that it it just becomes, instead of a trauma response of freezing or
Mhm.
flight or whatever that natural response is, which it is a natural response to trauma history, is that then it becomes a more calm and re-regulating response
Yes.
of
Yeah.
mindfulness or whatever it may be, whatever practices, breathing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's another point too about regulation, nervous system regulation, is that mammals, of which people are mammals, um, which we kind of forget sometimes when we're mostly in our thinking brain, but we have bodies, we have nervous systems, and we react to things. And we need other mammals to regulate with. And so some people that would be like I have a dog here that I really love. I don't have another warm mammal around other than my dog, unless I drive into town for an hour and I see my son and his family. And right now with COVID, there's a challenge for many people around that. So if you happen to live with people and you like living with them and you feel safe living with them, then you have that you can co-regulate together. And this is a real factor with parents too. I don't think we were ever meant to live in nuclear families where there's so much pressure
right.
on a parent or parents. And so we end up with not having, our parents don't have a regulated nervous system and then they can't co regulate with us. So we can learn a little bit of this ourselves. We can practice breathing and we can do those things. But oftentimes the and there's been some studies the last few years that have said it actually doesn't matter what method a therapist uses. What really matters is the relationship you have with between the patient and the therapist. Because if you have a therapist who's regulated themselves and you can be present with them in a way that you're not feeling shamed, you can be authentic, then that heals so much of the prior disconnection. And so that might be the first time we've had an experience like that. And I'm not a therapist. The method I use is a facilitation of a mindfulness inquiry, somatic based mindfulness inquiry. And it's a similar principle around co regulating with me because I've done enough of my own healing work that I'm regulated. And when I'm working with somebody, especially, I'm listening, I'm in my body, I'm paying attention, I'm breathing. I might suggest that they take a breath because I can tell they're not breathing. Let's come back into the body. but we need that with each other. And part of it comes from, when we were living in small tribes, and if we literally would die if we were kicked out of the tribe. And so we need other people to connect with to feel safe. And that's, with the loneliness and the isolation of the way that we live right now, it's not a good situation for people. So COVID has made it worse, but we were already in an epidemic of loneliness before this. And how that ties back into the Radical Recovery Summit is when we feel alone and threatened, we will do something to help us feel better. And a lot of times we're turning into some kind of addictive process or addictive substance to help us get away from the pain of the disconnection and isolation.
Yeah,
And the
I
pain
gained 29 pounds. Well, I during the pandemic, I gained 29 pounds because I was emotional eating, and then I had this aha moment. I saw a picture of myself, and I said, "When did that happen?"
yeah, and it happens over just a few months.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I took a step back and I said, "Okay, this is what has been happening. I've been stuffing my food because I'm a social person and I haven't been able to connect with my people and sit around the fire pit and chat and laugh and do what I love to do and play
Yeah.
cards and yeah, and
Mm.
so." Um, Now I've lost 12 of those pounds and making healthy choices, but it was a moment of aha moment
Yeah.
of and
Right.
being able to realize that. But yeah, it is what happens. Yes.
And so then many people would go into a shame storm seeing that. And what you did was when, oh, okay, this is COVID related. I'm not having my usual supports, my usual connection. How can I work with this in a way that's more skillful? Um, and sometimes I did a series of COVID interviews right in March, April, May, and Karen Koenig was on, and she's works with food and dysregulated eating. And she said, for some people, this lockdown situation is going to be a perfect opportunity to work with their food and their eating issues. And they're going to be able to, the pressure's off. You're not running around back and forth to work all the time. And so for some people, they're going to go really deeply into, I'm ready to be more healthy around this. I'm ready to be more intentional. And she said, and for other people, it's going to be the worst possible time because maybe you're living with a couple small kids and you're trying to work from home. Maybe you don't have someone that you live with that you like or that you feel safe with. So, not to shame ourselves for coping in however we cope,
Right.
and to try not to let it snowball into a complete disaster, but to really be kind with ourselves because our nervous systems are alarmed. It's scary what's going on in our world right now with all the
Yeah.
social unrest and unhealed trauma. And we see it so much more clearly now, I think, as well. And this is our nervous system responding. This isn't our higher level brain. This is our nervous system freaking out and going, I need some comfort. I need some grounding. I need to feel something other than just this panic or this dread or what's going to happen or. So it's really important to be able to work with it in that way of just kind of having a wake up going, oh, okay, but not shaming yourself for it. And then you have the tools because you've done a
Right.
lot of your healing work, right?
Yeah.
And if you weren't in that situation, or if you weren't in a physical situation that was conducive, then to just really try to be kind with ourselves. It never helps to put shame onto something. It always
Right.
helps to try and connect in a friendly way with ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's such a great valid point because it wasn't. I think if I'd been hard on myself and been what
Yeah.
I'd have dove into another bag of chips. Um, but instead, I really looked at it and took a step back from it and said,
Mhm.
"Okay, yeah, what's going on here, kiddo?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a supportive way. Yeah.
One of the things that I would love for you to talk about is Stephen Porges's "Safety is the treatment." Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, that's such a profound statement. And one of the other things he says is that safety is the absence of threat plus a feeling of connection. So, getting back to this co regulation, as human beings, we need to be in, we need to feel connected. We need to feel like we're in some kind of social circle, family circle, community, extended community. And so, safety is a treatment when he's talking about it in terms of a therapy relationship or something, could mean that we feel safe with a therapist. We're not going to be shamed. It could also mean the same thing in interpersonal relationships. Um, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit tricky because we all have our go to strategies. So if somebody has a fight response to feeling threatened, and someone else has an immobilizing freeze response to feeling threatened, and they're living together during COVID, the person with the fight response might go into some pretty unhealthy anger and shaming, which is going to make the person in freeze go more deeply into freeze. And the person in freeze might be really frustrating to be around because it's like trying to interact with a blank wall, you know? So when we're deeply into freeze, and we can be emotionally in freeze too, as a lot of the threats now aren't physical as much as emotional, but it can just feel like we're not really there. And we can be in that kind of some kind of a freeze, like a denial of reality. We don't really see things clearly. Sometimes it's we're off in our head a lot. Sometimes it's that we're fantasizing about the life we'll have once, to do around with weight. Once I've lost that 30 pounds, this is going to be my life. And I remember thinking that when I was a lot younger. I don't have that delusion anymore. And I don't kind of wait for that, right? To have a life. I have a life anyway. But
Yeah.
but that kind of feeling of however you manage to get there to feel safe, that alone will heal your nervous system. And so if you have a dog or a horse or a cat or some other mammal, a pet, and you feel safe with them, every time you have that direct experience, something is healing in your system. And every time we have the experience of danger, something is being threatened in our system. And so it's all about trying to have enough positive experiences to build the neural connections in the brain so that we can start to let our positive experiences transform our brain. And so, like Rick Hansen talks about, pay attention 10 seconds, 10,000 times, he says. Or, 10 or 15 seconds of just noticing, somebody smiling at you in the not so much in the grocery store anymore. Maybe when you do curbside pickup,
Right.
they're smiling at you. Or we smile at somebody or we make a connection with them. And there's this disconnection from ourselves because we could be unsafe for ourselves as well. And that happens often when we have the inner critic or when we have a lot of shame. So if every time we notice that we're starting to go into a panic attack or we're going into, here's another night that's just wasted because I've been watching TV or Netflix the whole time, and we go into a shame or an attack, then our experience with ourselves, our direct experience with ourselves, is one that we're not safe.
Yeah.
So how are we going to handle that? Mostly we go up into thoughts. So we might get into real catastrophic thinking. Certainly the inner critic, that nasty inner critic, is a big problem for many of us. And one of the ways that I've worked with that has been to see it. And I don't have that anymore. I don't ever shame myself anymore, which is such a relief. Um, but people who had a really nasty parent who did that will often have those really installed in their nervous system and in their brain. And I didn't have that. I had an emotional distance and I didn't really think anybody cared about me. But I didn't have a contemptuous parent who was
Yeah.
demeaning me all the time. So that's a different kind of a situation. And oftentimes the inner critic is so harsh. So Pete Walker and his book Complex PTSD has been a really important resource for a lot of people. He talks about from thriving, from surviving to thriving. And he has a whole bunch of things on his website too about working with inner critic. And he's overcome that in his own personal life. And He's a therapist, has been a therapist for many years, and he has another book called The Tao of Fully Feeling, which also kind of helps us to wake up a little bit and come into our actual emotions, grieving, feeling what we're feeling. And so those experiences gradually, as we live through feeling, we gradually realize that in fact it's safe to feel. And so we might be doing that with a therapist or someone like me, or we might be doing that on our own or through all kinds of other ways that we can heal. But we need to have that in our body. It's safe to be here experience. And that is the treatment. That's what heals us. So, however, we get to that,
Yeah.
that's the treatment.
Well,
Mm,
and I love that because I think in turning it back to ACEs for just a second in the study
mhm,
of adverse childhood experiences and ACEs science is that one caring adult, and so that person, what an impact a coach, a teacher, a grandparent, a loving presence can be on a child's life, a child who may be living in a household that has that critical parent or that emotionally distant parent or
mhm.
in creating, which is trauma,
Yeah,
but having that person there, that connection that you're talking about. What I know people asked me after hearing my story, Terry, how did you, like, you're always radiating joy and you're smiling and you're
yeah,
happy. How'd you do it? And I used to think, I, I don't
I don't know.
know. Like, I don't know how I did it. And
Yeah,
then once I understood ACEs science and resilience part of it and said,
yeah,
oh, my grandma Kitty, oh, my best friend's parents,
yeah.
these people that were these loving presences in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And that's something that we can be for ourselves, but also we can be that for other people. So, a lot of people will say, just my showing up every day, coming to these practices is a regulating force in their life. And they can count on me to be there and they can count on me to be regulated. And even if I'm sleepy or worried or whatever before, I sit down a couple minutes ahead of time and I just dial in and I'm there. And so I've had people like that too. One of my grandmas was like that. The other one was very mean. One of my grandmas was like that. And I had a teacher from I was in a 3-4 class combined, and he was teaching. And then he moved up to 5-6 when I moved up to 5-6. And then he moved into grade 7 when I went into
Oh my
junior high.
gosh.
And so I had him for 5 years, and he was that for me. And it makes a lot of difference. Like, you can't really believe that you're as bad as your thoughts say if you have someone who thinks that you're okay,
Yeah.
someone who sees your goodness. And I
Yeah.
remember one time I was being punished for something, which wasn't often because I really wanted to please, at that age. And so he had me and another girl, I think we'd pass a note or something. And he says, I just want you to sit and put your hands under your legs and just kind of sit with your fingers under your legs for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it was. He wasn't mad or anything like that. He was
Right.
just, trying to get our attention. And at the end of it, I think the other girl left and I was just there with him. And I must have been upset. And I must have said something about, I don't think you're going to like me anymore or something. And he said, I don't like you because you behave. I like you because of who you are and your spirit, basically. I don't know what exact words he used,
Yeah.
And I remember that. And so, why do I remember that? Because that is not the feeling that I had when I was a child. I had the feeling that behavior got me approval, kept me out of trouble, good behavior, but I didn't really feel like I mattered to anybody. But I mattered to him, and that was enough. So I think that one person, that's a powerful thing. And maybe we can go back and remember we had glimpses of that. And for some people, they're not going to have anybody that kind of comes to mind. So maybe we could kind of be that person for
Yeah.
ourselves.
And I
We
was
can
just
go
gonna say
back.
that we can be that person for one another, especially during this
Yeah,
pandemic, is be that one, that caring person in another
yeah,
person's life. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of this has to do with shame and the disconnection we feel. And so if we can look in someone's eyes and say, this is how I feel, and the person is safe for us to be with, and so they say, I get that, or whatever it is, we have that sense of they're not shaming us. They don't think any worse of us because we had that experience. And that's a really powerful thing when we can say the worst thing that we think about ourselves and the other person stays with us. That's a really powerful experience because that's the thing we think that we're going to get kicked out of the tribe for.
Right.
So instead of being kicked out, we're met and we're like, yeah, that's common. I know about that. I felt that. You're not a bad person because you feel that way or because you did that thing. A lot of things that we do, I've done some things that, I really wish I hadn't done. And I've been in freeze and not seen some other things that I really wish I'd seen at the time. But I wasn't any more healed at that time than I was, and I didn't have the resources then, and I have them now. So now I can kind of be present and kind, and I've done a lot of work hanging out with my teenager, and she's a pretty cool kid. It's not how I felt at the time, but yeah, there was just so much suffering there, and so
Yeah.
it's good to be able to connect again.
Yeah. Well, let's steer a little bit towards unhelpful beliefs. So, can you help us understand a little bit more about that?
Right. So these are primarily unconscious. Sometimes we know, but oftentimes they're unconscious. And so one of the things that Scott Kiloby and Dan McClintock, when they were developing the Kiloby inquiries, came up with was how do we figure out what those are? Like, how do we see those? So we might have a sense that, going back to core deficiency beliefs, that we believe there's something wrong with us or there's some shame lingering. And if we've had some kind of an addiction or something like that, there's a lot of shame that's just associated with that too. But we also have this shame that there's something wrong with our nervous system. There's something wrong. I feel broken. I feel helpless. I'm never going to get this figured out. And so on the surface, the conscious mind, we know that we're not broken. We know that we can heal because we have a lot of, we've healed a lot of this. But there's still that lingering, what is it that's still in that unconscious mind that we could bring forward and have a look at? So one of the things we do is a reverse inquiry, and we might say something opposite of what we believe. So if we believe that we have to hide who we are because there's something shameful about us, then we might say, I'm completely comfortable letting everybody know exactly who I am. Or, if we're working with addiction, it might be, I don't care if my best friend comes in and sees me at the end of a binge or at the end of a night of drinking. I don't care, I'm okay with all of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some kind of response. It's like, oh no, especially with addictions and those kinds of trauma responses, those are secret and
Yeah.
they don't really survive the light of day. And so we might have a response, well, I don't want them to see that, or I don't want them to know that about me. And again, it's that fear that we're going to be shunned and kicked out of the circle. And so to do that, we'll ask a question like that, or we'll make a statement. So instead of just saying, what is it that's holding me back? It's not very specific. But if we can come up with a really specific statement, I'm fine if everybody sees me, whatever it is, then something in our body is going to say no. And it might be our mind too. It might be, no, I'm not letting people see that. Or, I have to, keep my, position as a parent. I need to be respected. I need, we have all of those things. But when we're doing this inquiry, we're really just looking at what's internalized, what got stored, and how can I bring that up and heal it so that it's not driving me anymore. So then we come into our body and we come back to, I got a big tight fist in my gut when I said that statement. So obviously it's not true. Or my shoulders went back up around my ears. So we can take a few deep breaths and kind of downregulate it a little bit. And then we can work with it with thoughts and the sensations. So usually the thoughts come first because that's often, the two of them are connected, they drive each other. But what's your thought about that? So if your thought is no, I'd be shamed, I'd be kicked out, I'd feel humiliated. Then we could just look at those words. Sometimes there's somebody's face, especially if we had a parent who did that to us a lot. So we kind of sift through and we stay with them. And one of the things that we're always doing with the somatic mindfulness is staying in the present moment. So if you have a thought come up, whether it's words or pictures, and it feels intense, and then you have especially if you stop breathing or you have an energy in your body, we want to take some of the charge off of that first. So, and whoever's listening could just do this. So if you bring up a picture and then kind of notice what's your response to that image, notice it in your body as well. Is there an uneasiness or some kind of an energy? But then bring your attention just to the picture and see if you can see it in a frame. So sometimes it helps. Might even put our hands up and kind of see it in the frame. We can put it on the other wall. We can keep our eyes open and do it, or we can do it with our eyes closed. But then just bring your fingers up and take your attention into the sound of the tapping and the sensation of the tapping. So we're taking our attention just into that. And then take a deep breath and have a look at the image again. And has the image changed at all, or the words of it, is your experience with that changed at all?
Well, with me, it
Yeah.
became less alive, like
Yeah. It
more of a
fades.
flat, not
Yeah.
3D-ish, more 2D-ish.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's reliable, actually. And we have a number of tools that we can do with that. It becomes less real in this moment. We can see it as a picture. This is a memory or something, right? And then we can come in, and I know this obviously takes a lot longer if we're going to do an actual, you know, work with this. Then we come in, and did anything come up in your body? Was there any kind of tightening or,
Yeah, my right leg started to tingle, which is a very common trauma response for me, for whatever. That's a body memory for me.
right?
Yeah,
Okay. So then we could work with that as a sensation. So one of the things you could do is describe the sensation. So it's in your right leg, it's tingling. Does it tingling move around, or is it kind of steady? Like what's your
more like a pulsating, like a
okay.
almost like an adrenal surge, but just in my right leg.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. And is there any kind of activity that you want to do? Like do you want to run? Do you want to move your leg? Anything like
yeah,
that?
like stretch it and move it, and just yes, get
Right.
it
Right.
moving. Yeah,
Okay. And does it move up into your torso, into your body at all, or does it stay in your leg?
it stays there,
Right.
and now it's dissipating, moving around just that little bit,
Right. Right.
dissipated. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we have a sensation like that, arms or legs, it's often that we need to complete an action that we couldn't complete at the time. So
Ah,
moving the body is very, very helpful because you're not immobilized right now. You're free to move your leg, right?
yeah,
But at the time, you might not have been. And so it can help us in our nervous system feel that it's safe enough to do that. And then we could stay with that. We could go, what does this mean? Why is it here? And you might have thoughts come up, memories come up. We can look at them because thoughts are words or pictures again. And we just kind of keep going back, and we just keep kind of noticing what's here. Is it a threat? What's it here for? Sometimes we might also look at how old does this feel? Like, is this something that I remember from when I was 3 years old or 10 years old? Is this something that I remember after something significant happened? So for you, do you remember that from childhood
yeah.
or
It just came to me. It was 9 years old, and my dad was hitting me. Yes,
right?
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that was a very odd sensation, and I was very trapped. And yeah, and he was telling me, "Don't move," because he was hitting me with a belt.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So then we could work with that. You could work with the images, you could work with, the words, don't move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to know that that's what that is.
That's
It
amazingly cool.
it is, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Wow.
So sensations and feelings are never random.
That was just
Yeah.
one of those really cool. I mean, I hate to say cool to trauma, but
Yeah.
for me, because I understand the powerful impact of healing work,
Mhm.
that to me, I now get excited when I have these aha moments.
Yeah.
It used to be terrifying, and I
Yeah.
would bawl my eyes out in EMDR sessions over
Yeah.
that 4-year period that I did EMDR. But
Mm.
now I go, oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
this is it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I know I can do the healing work necessary to
Yeah.
help that dissipate and resolve itself and resolve that trauma. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. And sometimes it's very nonverbal. We just have to move our leg and take a few breaths and then we're okay. Other times we might go right into the memory or into the pictures and, do more tapping. A lot of it depends on, is this kind of dragging us out of the present moment? So, you seem very regulated right now. It doesn't look like you've gone back to that age when that was happening. So you're able to stay present. But if you weren't, then we would stop what we're doing and we would handle that. We would help kind of just stay with it. And so that's a really powerful experience to know that that comes up and it's because of something. It's not random, it's linked to a certain experience. And then when we see that, it makes a big difference. And you can move your leg and then it dissipates. So you know that too,
Right. And
right?
that I can move. It's not that
Yes.
don't move. It
Yeah,
just
exactly.
subconsciously was in my head, don't move.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I can move.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so that tingling, that feeling, that pulsing in your leg was you trying to get away. It was you, but you couldn't because you were immobilized, right?
yeah.
Yeah. It's a very powerful
Wow.
thing to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very powerful and
Mhm.
and beautiful in a healing way.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. One
well,
of the
that's great.
things that's so helpful here is that we don't feel trapped anymore. Like, one of the things that we need to do when we're traumatized is get ourselves to a place of safety. And part of that is we need to heal our own nervous system and, start to breathe more deeply and start feeling safer physically. And some of those things that we can do are um, kind of in the moment things. One of the things we sometimes do is this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so if anybody is feeling kind of dysregulated right now, maybe we could just do that for a minute. So
Yeah.
you look around the room and you name out loud if you can. If you're in a coffee shop, you might not name it out loud, but name out loud 5 things you can see. So just, I see this, I see this.
Yeah,
And then 4 things that you can feel. So 4 textures. I can feel the table. I can feel the warmth of my leg. I can feel. And what this is doing is it's orienting us back into the moment. And then 3 things that I can hear. So 3 sounds I can hear. So I could hear, if you're in a coffee shop, you might hear the sound of people talking or music or something. So we just name those one after another. And we might even not go all the way to one because we might be regulated by, just the things that we can see and touch. And then 2 things that we can smell, or 2 favorite smells. And then 1 thing that we can taste, or a favorite taste. And by then, we're usually a lot more in this moment. So we're able to go, well, that was kind of scary, what just came up.
yeah,
And now I'm feeling kind of, I'm here. I can see that my body knows that it's safe. And then there's some other things like Peter Levine uses the syllable VU, but the science behind it is that if we have an exhalation for 6 seconds or more, that helps to stimulate the relaxation response in our body. So we just breathe in and then VU,
ooh,
and then take another deep breath. And we could do that 3 or 4 times. And then we can kind of feel that vibration in our
yeah,
chest. So there's a lot of wonderful tools. And I have actually a tab on my website called Emergency Practices. So if anyone is resonating with some of these and they want to go find some more, there's a lot of good ideas on there. Another one is to hold your own hand, to feel the warmth and support of your hand. I mean, that's such a simple thing. Or to give ourselves a hug, or, there's a lot of different ways. Take a few deep breaths is another one. So this whole somatic meaning in the body, and mindfulness meaning we're aware of what's happening, we're here, we're present. It's a powerful approach to healing trauma. And then as we heal, what's left is the joy you were talking about. It's what are we interested in doing? What are we, if we're in a state of freeze or immobilization, we're not going to be interested in anything.
right,
But if we come out of that and we start to kind of look around and go, well, I'm still alive. I can still have an interest. What do I want to do? Like, what excites me? And even during COVID, we can find things to do that are really interesting. And oftentimes then we'll find other people that, you know, like you and I have found each other,
Yeah, yeah,
that we resonate with and we enjoy being with, and that can be a wonderful kind of an enlivening practice too.
yes.
Mhm.
And I love that you said practice again, because it really is
Yes.
about the
Yeah.
the practice of when I walk outside this morning and I saw my hibiscus had bloomed like 5 flowers, and I just stopped
Nice.
and paused and said, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing and so beautiful!" And just practicing being in the moment and savoring the joy of
Mhm.
just those flowers. And
Mhm.
yeah,
There's a lot of beauty in the world.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, awesome. Well, I have a really quick story to tell you in
Mhm.
relation to what you just talked about, only because this was so powerful for me. I flew back home last month to see my elderly mother, who will be 85 December 7th.
Mhm.
And so, flying, my 14-year-old daughter went with us, and we were in a very empty flight. So, it was wonderful. We had our masks and had my wipes and wiped everything down before we sat down, but no one around us. So, flight down, great. Didn't take Xanax, which I always used to have to do when flying because I would have heightened anxiety and panic attacks back a
Mhm.
while ago. And no issues. Flight down. Flying back home, I was doing great and coloring my Zen coloring book with my gel pens, and it was very peaceful. When my daughter leaned towards the window to take a picture, and instantly I went to, oh my gosh, we're 36,000 feet above the earth. She's going to fall. And it was just, again, just an irrational fear,
Right, right.
which logically I know she's not going to fall out of the plane 36,000 feet. And see my legs tingling again. Isn't that wild?
Ah,
Uh,
ah,
but so my instantly, my, like panic,
yeah,
anxiety, everything went quick up.
yeah.
Well, because of all the practice I've done and the mindfulness work, I did exactly what you just talked about, the 5 4 3 2 1, which is my favorite go to. And instantly just started feeling the arms of the chair that I
Mhm.
was sitting in, and the texture of my, I had my little um, tray down in front of me, and it
Oh,
had
yeah.
little ridges and bumps on it, and it was cool to the touch. I had a Nutri-Grain bar in my lap, and I took a bite of it
Mhm.
and paid attention to the flavors of the strawberry. And I just started doing all of those. And meanwhile, as I felt myself starting to come down and calm, I would take a deep breath.
Um,
And I started to stretch my hearing to see how far away I could hear a sound, like somebody way in the back of the plane, if I could hear them
mhm,
talking. And
mhm.
again, by the time, within a minute,
Right.
I was right back to, okay. And I went back to my coloring.
That's
But
awesome.
I was able to do
Mm.
that because, but it was so habitual, and it was
Mhm.
such an automatic response because I practice 5 4 3 2 on mindfulness every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of escalating up and escalating or maybe ordering a couple of shots of something from the
Right.
flight attendant,
Right.
you just you recognized it was happening, and then you went right into the tools.
Yeah.
And that gives us such a sense of agency, which is the opposite of what we felt when we were children,
Right.
when we didn't really have the power to change our environment. But we do now. So what a
Yeah.
wonderful story to end with too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for letting me share it, because again, I love the work you do. Well, I just adore you. Your energy, what you were talking about before. Oh, it does. It brings a sense of calm into
Mm.
my being. And that's that connection. You're that one caring person right now in this moment with me. And
Mm. Yeah, and you for me too. It's wonderful when we
yeah.
can have that mutual exchange. Yeah, for sure. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much. So let's go into where people can connect with you. So
Okay.
your website and that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, thank you. So, yes, people can find me at terrywellbrock.com. So it's TERI, one R, WELLBROCK. And yeah, there you can connect with the podcast. There's links for the podcast, but also on Facebook at the Healing Place Podcast. And then on YouTube, it's also at Terry Wellbrock.
Mhm.
But I think if you type in the search, the Healing Place podcast, it pops up to my channel, which is wonderful. So thank you. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and if somebody wants to get a hold of me, my links are on the Radical Recovery Summit too, but it's lynnfraserstillpoint.com. And that kind of carries through Facebook and YouTube and Insight Timer and all of those as well. So I'd really encourage people to get in touch. And if you'd like to come to my daily practice at 8 a.m. Eastern, it's every single day. And by the time this is aired, it will be running, we'll be into a couple months into our 6th year of daily practice together. It's a beautiful community. And then we have classes on Sundays. Right now, we're working with being grounded in these chaotic times. We're working with the polyvagal theory and our nervous systems, part of which we talked about today. So, yeah, so I just really encourage people to get in touch and watch the other interviews in the Radical Recovery Summit. There's such an interesting group of people. And, we have someone who's working on unschooling. And Akila Richards talks about that and how to deprogram ourselves. And, Scott Kiloby talking about chronic pain and how to really work skillfully with these challenging situations like nerve pain, and all kinds of other people that are just so interesting to talk with. And Stephen Porges as well. He's part of this year too. So yeah, so get involved and learn. I think that one of the most important things is that we can learn about our nervous system and our mind. We can start to intervene in things that aren't healthy for us, that are causing us suffering. And then we're free of the suffering or more free. It's a process again, but it's really, really possible to heal. And I think that's kind of the way I'd like to leave it, is just with that encouragement and to know it's possible.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. Well, thank you again for shining your beautiful light of hope and
Thank you.
helping guide others along that healing journey.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being on here and having this conversation. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. Welcome to the 2021 Radical Recovery Summit, presented by the Kiloby Center for Recovery. This is Lynn Fraser, your moderator. This year, our theme is Feel It, Heal It, a new paradigm of recovery, featuring a diverse group of thought leaders and innovators, people who are working on the ground in the new field of addiction recovery. Go to radicalrecoverysummit.com to sign up and watch free.